The Royal Observatory of Astri Prime offered the best view of the approaching disaster. Queen Lyria stood before the vast dome window, her luminescent blue skin reflecting the sick orange glow of their dying sun. The Astralese had thrived for millennia beneath its light, but now the celestial body that gave them life was slowly poisoning their world. Your Majesty, High Council Naren bowed deeply as she entered. The royal physicists request your presence. There has been a development. Lyria turned, her silver eyes narrowing. Another failed solution? No, my queen. A foreign vessel has entered our system. It appears to be exploratory in nature. Not of any known species. Minutes later, Lyria studied the holographic projection of the ship. Unlike the elegant, crystalline structures of Astralese vessels, this craft was angular, utilitarian, almost primitive. Yet it had somehow traversed the vast distances between stars. They call themselves humans, explained Chief Scientist Torin. They've been transmitting peaceful messages in various mathematical sequences. They appear unaware of our crisis. Or perhaps they're aware and have come to witness our end, Lyria said bitterly. 20 years wearing the crown had taught her to expect the worst from the universe. Against the unanimous objection of her council, Lyria ordered first contact. If these humans possessed technology advanced enough for interstellar travel, perhaps they had something to offer the dying Astralese civilization. The human delegation arrived 3 days later. Lyria watched from her throne as 5 figures entered the crystal hall, their environmental suits bulky and awkward compared to the flowing garments of her people. Their leader stepped forward and removed his helmet. Lyria had studied countless species across the galaxy, but something about the human's appearance struck her. His skin was a rich brown, his eyes dark and intelligent. When he smiled, it wasn't the practiced diplomacy she'd come to expect from ambassadors, it was genuine warmth. Queen Lyria of the Astralese, he said, his voice translated through the chamber's acoustic field. I am Commander Marcus Hayes of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon. We come in peace and with great respect for your civilization. Commander Hayes, she replied, standing to approach him. Protocol demanded she remain distant, but curiosity pulled her forward. What brings your people so far from home? Exploration. Learning. The hope of finding others among the stars. His eyes met hers without flinching, unusual, as most species found the silver gaze of the Astralese unsettling. We had no idea we would find a civilization in crisis. If there's any way we can assist, we offer our knowledge freely. For the first time in years, Lyria felt something beyond the crushing weight of her responsibility, hope. Over the following weeks, Marcus and his team integrated themselves into Astralese society. While his scientists worked with Torin, Marcus spent hours with Lyria, learning about her world and sharing stories of Earth. He spoke of oceans and mountains, of diverse cultures and histories. His passion for life infected Lyria, reminding her of the young queen she had once been, before crisis became her constant companion. You carry too much alone, Marcus told her one evening as they walked through the palace gardens, now wilting under the sun's changing radiation. It is the burden of the crown, she replied automatically. No, he said, stopping to face her. It's a choice. Even on Earth, our leaders sometimes forget they are still human beneath their titles. Lyria looked at him curiously. And what am I beneath my title, Commander? His smile then, gentle and sincere, pierced something long dormant within her chest. A woman, he said simply. Brilliant and fierce, but still deserving of joy. That night, looking at the stars from her chambers, Lyria realized Marcus saw what no one in her court had seen in decades, not just the queen of the Astralese, but Lyria herself. The royal gardens of Astri Prime had once been the crown jewel of the palace, a sprawling expanse of bioluminescent flora that glowed in perfect harmony with the twin moons. Now, patches of withered plants revealed the devastation spreading across their world, but in the central grotto, where ancient water trees still flourished, Lyria could almost forget the looming apocalypse. "You're telling me your people have never experienced rain?" Marcus asked, incredulous as he sat beside her on the crystalline bench. "Not as you describe it," Lyria replied, captivated by the animation in his features. "Our water cycles through the atmosphere as a fine mist. The concept of water falling in droplets seems almost violent." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing pleasantly against the crystal structures. "I promise it's beautiful. Sometimes on Earth, rain falls while the sun still shines, creating arcs of color across the sky." "Rainbows," Lyria said, remembering their earlier conversations. "I've studied the phenomenon in other planetary systems, but never experienced it. If we solve your solar crisis, perhaps you could visit Earth someday." His voice softened. "I'd like to show you the oceans, the forests, everything." The implication hung between them, a future where their worlds intersected beyond this diplomatic mission. Lyria felt a flutter in her chest, an unfamiliar sensation she had begun to associate with Marcus's presence. "Your Majesty." Naren's voice cut through the moment. The High Council stood at the garden entrance, disapproval evident in her rigid posture. "The Council awaits your presence for the emergency session." Lyria nodded, rising gracefully. "Commander Hayes has been sharing valuable insights about Earth's historical climate adaptations." "Indeed," Naren replied coldly. "Though I'm certain the commander has duties of his own to attend to with his team." As Lyria followed Naren through the palace corridors, she could feel the weight of unspoken judgment. The council chambers fell silent as she entered, 12 pairs of silver eyes watching her carefully. "The human scientists report their atmospheric stabilization proposal is progressing," Elder Vox began, "but we have more pressing concerns today." Counselor Zeth cleared his throat. "There are whispers among the court about your Majesty's frequent private consultations with the human commander. Is scientific diplomacy now subject to gossip?" Lyria asked, her voice sharp. "When it involves our queen spending unchaperoned time with an alien species, yes," Naren replied. "The royal bloodline has maintained our connection to the planet for 10,000 years. Any compromise of that lineage could jeopardize the very rituals we may need to save our world." Lyria's hands clenched beneath the table. "I am well aware of my responsibilities to our people." That evening, as Lyria reviewed the latest solar degradation reports, a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Marcus stood at her chamber entrance, holding a small device. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, "but I wanted to show you something." The device projected a hologram, a three-dimensional model of Astri's sun with new stabilization vectors. "My team thinks we can buy your world decades, possibly centuries, with targeted particle emitters," he explained, his eyes bright with cautious optimism. Lyria moved closer, studying the projection. Their hands brushed as they both reached to adjust the model, and neither pulled away. The physical contact, taboo among Astralese royalty, sent a current through her body. "Marcus," she whispered, "your help means everything to us, to me." "I've extended our mission indefinitely," he replied, his voice low. "Earth Command understands the importance of this work." His gaze held hers, and Lyria saw in it everything she had denied herself for years: companionship, understanding, desire. The space between them vanished as she made a decision that was entirely Lyria the woman, not Lyria the queen. Later, as they lay beneath the holographic stars in her chambers, Marcus traced the luminescent patterns on her skin with gentle fingertips. "On Earth, we have stories of star-crossed lovers," he murmured. "People from different worlds, different circumstances, who find each other against all odds." "And how do these stories end?" Lyria asked, resting her head against his chest, listening to his single heart, so different from her dual heartbeats. Marcus was silent for a moment. "Some end in tragedy. Others find a way." In the weeks that followed, they found moments together between their duties, stolen embraces in the observatory, whispered conversations during diplomatic receptions, knights mapping the differences between their species with intimate curiosity. The palace staff pretended not to notice, but the council's disapproval grew palpable. "We will find a way," Lyria told herself each morning as she returned to being the queen her people needed. But at night, in Marcus's arms, she allowed herself to dream of a future where duty and desire weren't opposing forces, where the stars aligned in their favor, and the love blooming between human and astrolese could exist in the light. "The particle emitters are functioning better than we anticipated," Marcus said, his fingers tracing the holographic display in the Royal Science Chamber. "Earth has agreed to provide the materials for a full-scale implementation." Lyria watched him with pride mingled with adoration. In the 3 months since the humans had arrived, Marcus had become her partner in more ways than she had ever imagined possible. His presence at strategic meetings had initially raised eyebrows, but his insights had earned him reluctant respect from even the most traditional council members. "With these modifications," Chief Scientist Torin added, "we project stabilization of the solar degradation for approximately 70 years. 70 years, Lyria repeated, the weight of temporary salvation settling on her shoulders. Not a permanent solution, but time, precious time for her people. "It's enough to develop more permanent technologies," Marcus said, reading her thoughts as he had become accustomed to doing. "Enough time to consider planetary relocation if necessary." The science team dispersed, leaving them alone in the chamber's blue glow. Marcus reached for her hand, his fingers entwining with hers in a now familiar gesture. 70 years together, he whispered. "Imagine what we could build in that time." In the privacy of her chambers that night, they lay beneath the transparent ceiling, the sick orange sun long set and the stars of distant galaxies illuminating their entwined forms. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, his voice low against her luminescent skin, "about diplomatic arrangements between our worlds. Earth has protocols for permanent ambassadorial presence. I could request the assignment." Lyria propped herself up on one elbow, her silver eyes searching his face. "You would stay? Permanently? For you?" "Yes." His smile was tender as he traced the glowing patterns along her shoulder. "We could create something unprecedented, a true alliance between our species." "The council would resist," she murmured, though her hearts raced at the possibility. "Then we make them see the benefits. Technology exchange, cultural enrichment." He kissed her gently. "And perhaps, someday, when the time is right, a union that symbolizes that alliance." Lyria allowed herself to envision it, Marcus at her side during royal functions, their different species complementing each other. She imagined children with his warm eyes and her luminescent skin, little ones who would carry both worlds within them. "Our children would be beautiful," she whispered, giving voice to her most secret dream. "And brilliant," he added, pulling her closer. "With your wisdom and my stubbornness." Their laughter mingled in the quiet chamber, a sound so rare in the palace that Lyria treasured each occurrence. In Marcus's presence, she had rediscovered joy, a sensation she had almost forgotten in her years of leadership under crisis. The following morning brought Lyria back to harsh reality. Elder Vox requested a private audience, his ancient face grave as he activated the privacy field in the throne room. "The ancient texts have been consulted," he said without preamble. "There is a ritual that could restore our son's stability permanently." Lyria straightened, hope flaring in her chest. "Why am I only hearing of this now?" "Because the price is high, Your Majesty." Vox's silver eyes were clouded with age but sharp with purpose. "It requires the sacrifice of royal astrolese blood, a sacrifice only you can make." "My blood?" Lyria asked, her hand instinctively moving to her wrist. "Your essence. The ritual would bind your life force to the planetary core, using the ancient connection between our royal line and Astri Prime itself." He paused, his next words careful. "But it requires purity of lineage. The royal blood must be unmingled with other species." The implication struck Lyria like a physical blow. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting our civilization," Vox corrected. "Your relationship with the human commander jeopardizes everything. Should your blood become contaminated, the ritual would fail." "And if I refuse this ritual?" Lyria challenged, rising from her throne. "The particle emitters buy us time, yes. But they are not permanent. Eventually, our world will die." Vox bowed his head. "As queen, you have always put your people first. I merely remind you of that duty now." After Vox departed, Lyria stood motionless, staring at the grand tapestry depicting her ancestors, 27 generations of Astralese royalty who had guided their civilization through crisis after crisis. Each had sacrificed personal happiness for duty. That evening when Marcus spoke of their future, of diplomatic arrangements and shared quarters, Lyria smiled and listened. But as he slept beside her, she placed a hand on her abdomen, wondering with both fear and wonder if their union had already created something that would forever change both their worlds, a child of stars and earth, of duty and love. She had not yet told him of the possibility growing within her. Now, she wondered if she ever could. The royal physician's confirmation echoed in Lyria's mind as she stood alone in her private sanctuary. She was carrying Marcus's child, a miracle that defied the biological odds. The tiny life within her, barely 8 weeks in development, possessed genetic markers of both species, somehow harmoniously entwined. "The fetus appears healthy, Your Majesty," Dr. Mila had said, her professional demeanor slipping momentarily to reveal wonder. "But I must caution you, this is unprecedented. And given the current circumstances." Lyria had dismissed her with a nod, needing solitude to process the collision of joy and despair this news brought. Her hand rested protectively over her abdomen, feeling a connection to the child that transcended her rational understanding. This was her and Marcus's love made tangible, a bridge between their worlds. Yet this miracle had come at the worst possible time. The observatory door slid open, interrupting her thoughts. "There you are," Marcus said, his smile fading as he caught her expression. "What's wrong?" Lyria crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. Part of her wanted to share their miracle, to see his face light up with the joy of impending fatherhood. But Elder Vox's words haunted her. The ritual required purity of bloodline, and time was running out. "The council has summoned me to an emergency session," she said instead. "The latest solar readings show acceleration of the degradation process." "That's impossible," Marcus frowned. "The emitters should have stabilized. Your technology buys us time, but something has changed." This wasn't a lie, the reports had come in that morning. "The council is reconvening to discuss more traditional options." Marcus studied her face, sensing her withdrawal. "Traditional options? Lyria, what aren't you telling me?" Before she could answer, her communication device chimed with an urgent priority signal. The message was brief but devastating. The southern continental shelf had collapsed into the ocean following unprecedented seismic activity. Thousands were presumed dead. "I have to go," she whispered, the weight of her crown suddenly suffocating. 3 days later, as Lyria stood before the full council, the decision crystallized in her mind with terrible clarity. The reports were undeniable. The particle emitters had only aggravated certain aspects of their star's deterioration. Their world had months, not decades, unless drastic measures were taken. "The ancient ritual is our only remaining option," Elder Vox declared. "Your Majesty, you must decide now." High Council Naren, who had opposed Lyria's relationship with Marcus from the beginning, spoke with uncharacteristic gentleness. "If you are with child, as the physician's sealed report indicates, the ritual must be performed before the hybrid nature of the fetus affects your royal essence." Lyria's hands trembled. "How long do I have?" "The preparation takes 16 days, Vox replied. "It must begin immediately." "And the human delegation?" Counselor Zeth asked. Lyria closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself. They must leave. Their presence during the ritual could destabilize the planetary energies. The words tasted like ash in her mouth, but duty had always been her first commitment, even before her own happiness, before love. That night, she requested a final private meeting with Marcus in the royal gardens. She had spent hours rehearsing her lies, knowing he would see through any hesitation. An opportunity has emerged, she told him as they walked among the dying plants. An ancient astrolese method of planetary stabilization. Marcus's face brightened. That's wonderful news. Why didn't you tell me sooner? My team could help with implementation. No, she cut him off sharply, then softened her tone. This is sacred astrolese knowledge, forbidden to outsiders. The Council has unanimously voted that all off-worlders must depart before the process begins. His expression fell. For how long? The moment had come for the cruelest lie. Lyria forced herself to meet his gaze, calling upon every diplomatic skill she had ever learned to mask her breaking heart. Permanently. The process will render our atmosphere temporarily toxic to non-Astralis life. She turned away, unable to bear his shocked expression. Your mission here is complete, Commander Hayes. You've given us valuable time and knowledge. But now we must find our own salvation. Lyria, he reached for her hand, confusion and hurt radiating from him. This makes no sense. Just yesterday we were planning. Yesterday I was being selfish, she interrupted. Today I am being a queen. My duty is to my people, not to impossible dreams between different species. His hand fell away. I don't believe you. Something else is happening. Lyria summoned the last of her strength, drawing herself up with regal coldness. Believe what you wish, Commander. But your ship departs tomorrow at first light. That is non-negotiable. She turned and walked away, each step requiring monumental effort. She could feel his eyes on her back, confusion turning to hurt, perhaps even to anger. Better that way, she told herself. Better he hate her than try to stay and sacrifice himself. Later, sealed in her chambers, she watched through the palace security system as Marcus was escorted to his ship. His face was drawn, his attempts to communicate with her rebuffed by her guards. As the human vessel prepared for departure, Lyria placed her hand against the viewing screen, a silent farewell to the father of her child and the man who had reminded her she was more than just a crown. Forgive me, she whispered as the ship broke orbit, carrying away the only being in the universe who had seen beyond her title to the woman beneath. She allowed herself one moment of grief, a single tear that tracked luminescent blue down her cheek, before turning to face the ritual that would save her world at the cost of her heart. 5 cycles had passed since the Great Restoration. The skies above Astri Prime had returned to their natural azure hue, the dying orange glow of their sun replaced by healthy blue-white light. The ritual had succeeded beyond even the elders' expectations, permanently stabilizing their star through Lyria's sacrifice, not of her life, but of her connection to it. Queen Lyria stood on her private balcony, watching her daughter play in the royal gardens below. Arya had just celebrated her 4th naming day, her laughter echoing through the crystal spires of the palace. The child was a perfect blend of her parents, warm brown skin that held a subtle luminescence, eyes that shifted between human dark and astrolese silver depending on her mood, and a curious mind that questioned everything. She asked about him again today, said Mila, who had transitioned from royal physician to the princess's caretaker and Lyria's most trusted confidant. Lyria nodded, unsurprised. What did she want to know this time? If her father's world has oceans as big as ours. Mila smiled gently. She dreams of swimming in Earth's waters someday. Perhaps she will, Lyria murmured, though the words held little conviction. The ritual had saved their planet but had exacted its price. While Lyria's mixed-blood child had somehow enhanced rather than hindered the process, a miracle no elder could explain, the Queen herself had emerged changed. Her connection to the planetary core had burned away something essential within her, leaving her physically healthy but emotionally distant, as though part of her remained forever bound to Astri's heart. Only with Arya did she feel truly present, the child's existence a constant reminder of what had been real between her and Marcus. The communication array detected another transmission from Earth, Mila said carefully. The human continues his inquiries. 5 years, and Marcus had never stopped trying to understand what had happened. His messages came regularly, diplomatic inquiries that thinly veiled his personal questions. Why had she sent him away? What had really happened during the planetary restoration? Did she ever think of him? The Council intercepted most of these communications, but occasionally, like today, one would reach Lyria directly. Show me, she requested, following Mila to the private communication chamber. The screen flickered to life with Marcus's face. He had aged subtly, new lines around his eyes, a streak of silver at his temples. He wore a formal Earth uniform adorned with symbols of rank she didn't recognize. Queen Lyria, his recorded message began formally. I've been appointed Earth's diplomatic envoy to the Centauri systems, which brings me closer to Astralease space than I've been in 5 years. Our intelligence suggests your world has flourished since the restoration event. He paused, professional veneer slipping momentarily. I still don't understand what happened, or why contact was severed so completely. But I respect your sovereignty and your decisions. Lyria's expression remained impassive, though beneath her calm exterior, her dual hearts ached. Earth is proposing renewed diplomatic relations with Astralease, Marcus continued. My ship will be passing within communication range of your system in 3 weeks. If you wish to respond. He left the sentence unfinished, hope and resignation warring in his expression before the recording ended. Mila watched her carefully. Will you tell him about Arya? It was the question that had haunted Lyria for years. Her daughter deserved to know her father, to understand the human half of her heritage. Marcus deserved to know his child existed. Yet reopening that connection threatened to unravel the careful emotional distance Lyria had maintained, the only thing that made her daily sacrifice bearable. Prepare my shuttle, Lyria said suddenly. And inform the council I'll be temporarily unreachable. Your Majesty? Mila asked, startled. Lyria moved to the observatory, activating the star map that showed Marcus's projected route. It's time Arya saw the stars up close. 3 weeks later, a small royal vessel waited in the neutral space between systems. Arya pressed her face against the viewport, her child's excitement palpable as she watched the approaching Earth ship. Is he really my father? She asked for the 100th time. Will he like me? Lyria knelt beside her daughter, straightening the collar of her formal attire. He will love you instantly, just as I do. You are the bridge between our worlds, little one, the future neither of us could have imagined. As the airlock between the ships prepared to cycle, Lyria felt something stir within her, a warmth in the hollow space the ritual had left behind. Perhaps there would never again be a future for her and Marcus together. The responsibilities that had separated them remained, and the woman who had fallen in love with him had been partially consumed by the ritual that saved her world. But as the airlock doors slid open and Marcus stepped through, his disbelief turning to wonder as he saw the child with his eyes and Lyria's luminescence, she allowed herself to hope that across the vast distances between their stars, they might find a new kind of connection through the daughter they had created. Hello, Marcus, Lyria said softly, her voice steadier than her heart's. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Arya stepped forward, a perfect embodiment of 2 worlds bridged against impossible odds, and reached for her father's hand.